Welcome, students, to my lecture. If you are ready, let's just begin. I want to speak with you tonight about something that challenges everything the world has taught you about time, about the past, and about their capacity to change your life. I want to speak to you about the power of revision. Have you ours the ability to go back into your past and revise it, to change it, to reimagine it, and in doing so, to reshape your entire future? And I know that when you first hear this, it may sound impossible. It may sound like fantasy. It may sound like something that cannot be done. But I tell you, it can be done. And it is one of the most powerful tools available to you for transforming your life. Because most people are imprisoned by their past. They are carrying memories of things that went wrong, events that hurt them, failures that defined them, rejections that shaped their identity. And they believe that these past events are fixed. They believe that what happened is carved in stone, unchangeable, permanent. But I tell you, the past is not fixed. The past is subject to revision, not in the sense that the events themselves did not happen, but in the sense that the meaning you have given to those events can be changed. The interpretation you hold about those events can be transformed. And when you change the meaning and the interpretation, you change the entire effect that the past has on your present and your future. This is what I mean by revision. Revision is a practice of going back into the past, selecting an event that has troubled you, and reimagining it with a different outcome or a different meaning, and then making a revised version so real in your consciousness that it replaces the original memory. Now, let me be very clear about what I'm saying. I am not saying that you can deny that events happen. If you were rejected, you were rejected. If you failed, you failed. You were hurt. You were hurt. You were hurt. These events occurred. But I am saying that you can change how these events live in your consciousness. You can change what they mean. You can change the story you have told yourself about them. And in doing so, you can change the way they affect your present and your future. Think of it this way. An event happens. It is a fact. It occurred. But the meaning of that event, the interpretation of that event, the story we tell about that event, these are not facts. These are choices. And you have the power to choose a different meaning, a different interpretation, a different story. A man I knew was rejected for a job promotion. He wanted the position badly. He believed he was qualified for it. And when the company gave the position to someone else, he was devastated. He created a story about the rejection. He told himself, I am not good enough. The company does not value me. I will never be promoted. This is proof that I am not capable. And he carried this story with him. For months, his entire consciousness was shaped by this interpretation of the rejection. He felt diminished at work. He made decisions from a place of unworthiness. He became less engaged, less confident, less willing to take on challenges. And because he was making decisions from this wounded, diminished place, he was indeed unable to advance in his career. But then he learned about the power of revision. And he decided to revise the rejection, not to deny that it happened, but to change the meaning of it. He began to reimagine the situation. He imagined that the company had rejected him not because he was not good enough, but because they knew that he was destined for something greater. He imagined that the rejection was actually a blessing, a redirection toward a better opportunity. He imagined that the company had done him a favor by not giving him a position that would have kept him limited. And then he took it a step further. He began to revise not just the meaning of the rejection, but the event itself. He imagined going back to the moment when he received the news. And this time, he imagined that they called him into the office and told him that he had been promoted. He imagined the feeling of vindication and recognition. He imagined the pride of being chosen. If he did not do this once and forget about it, he returned to this revised version repeatedly. Every time the original rejection surfaced in his mind, he would deliberately revise it. He would replace the old memory with a new one.
He would feel the promoted version as vividly as possible. And something remarkable happened. His consciousness shifted. He no longer carried the wound of rejection. He began to feel confident again. And with that confidence, he began to engage more fully at work. He took on more challenging projects. He developed new skills. And within a year, he was offered an even better promotion at a different company. Now, you might say that the revision did not cause the promotion. You might say it was just a coincidence. But I tell you, the revision changed his consciousness. And his changed consciousness changed how he showed up at work. And that changed how people responded to him. And that changed what was available to him. This is the power of revision. It is not magic, it is not denying reality, it is changing the meaning of reality. And in changing the meaning, changing the effect that reality has on your present and future. Now let me speak about why revision is so powerful. It is powerful because your past is not actually in the past. Your past is alive in your consciousness now. Every memory you carry, every event you remember, every experience you had, all of these are alive in your consciousness in this present moment. And they are shaping your present consciousness. They are determining how you feel, how you think, what you believe about yourself and about the world. So when you revise your past, you are not trying to change something that happened long ago. You are changing something that is present in your consciousness right now. You are changing the way your past is alive in you in this very moment. A woman I knew had a traumatic experience in her childhood. Her father had been harsh and critical. He did not believe in her. He told her that she would never accomplish anything. And this created a wound in her, a wound that carried forward into her adulthood. She made decisions based on this wound. She did not pursue her dreams because she carried her father's voice inside her, telling her that she could not accomplish them. For decades, she was imprisoned by this memory. But then she learned about revision, and she decided to revise her relationship with her father, not to deny that he had been harsh and critical, but to change the meaning of his harshness in her consciousness. She began to imagine going back to moments when he had criticized her, and she reimagined those moments with compassion. She imagined that his criticism was not because she was inadequate, but because he was wounded himself. She imagined that beneath his harsh words, he actually believed in her, but could not express it. She imagined him telling her, "I am sorry for the harsh words. I see your potential. I believe in you." And she made this reimagined version so real in her consciousness that it began to replace the original memory. Not completely airy, where she could still remember what actually happened, but the sting was gone. The wound was healed. The meaning had changed. And once the wound was healed, once the meaning had changed, she found that she could pursue her dreams again. She found that his critical voice no longer lived inside her. She found that she was free to become who she wanted to become. This is what revision does. It heals the wounds of the past. It frees you from the meanings that have imprisoned you. It allows you to claim your power. Now I want to speak about the mechanism of revision. How does it work? Why does revising your past change your present and future? The answer lies in understanding that you are not a helpless observer of your life. You are not a victim of your circumstances or your past. You are a creator. And the stories you tell about your circumstances and your past are creating forces. They are creating your consciousness. And your consciousness is creating your reality. Most people are unconscious creators. They tell stories about their past without realizing they are doing it. They inherit interpretations from their parents, their culture, their environment. They accept the meanings that are given to them. And these meanings, these stories, become the foundation of their consciousness. And their consciousness creates their reality. But when you learn about revision, when you consciously choose to revise your past, you become a conscious creator. You take back the power to choose the meaning of your life. You choose the story you want to tell about your past. And that chosen story becomes the foundation of your consciousness. And that consciousness creates your reality. Let me give you a very specific example. A man was told his entire life that he was not smart. He did poorly in school. His teacher said he was not smart. His parents said he was not smart. His siblings said he was not smart. And he believed it. He accepted this meaning. He accepted the story that he was not intelligent. Because he believed this story, he made decisions based on it. He did not pursue education. He did not take on intellectually challenging work. He did not read or learn. He did everything from a place of accepting his perceived lack of intelligence, and because he made these decisions, he did indeed remain limited in his intellectual development. But then he learned about revision, and he decided to revise his past. He began to go back and reimagine his schooling. He reimagined himself as the student who was intelligent, who understood the material, who asked good questions, who excelled academically. He reimagined his teachers recognizing his intelligence. He reimagined his parents being proud of his intellectual abilities. And he made these revised memories so vivid that they began to replace his original memories. He began to carry a different story. He began to see himself as intelligent. And with this changed self-concept, he began to make different decisions. He began to pursue learning. He began to read voraciously. He began to take on intellectually challenging work. And through this changed behavior, he began to develop genuine intellectual capacity. His consciousness had changed through revision. And his changed consciousness changed his behavior. And his changed behavior changed his reality. Now, there is something very important to understand here. Revision is not about lying to yourself. It is not about denying reality. It is not about creating false memories. What revision is about is recognizing that reality has multiple dimensions. And you get to choose which dimension you focus on and which dimension becomes real in your consciousness. Let me explain this more carefully. When an event happens, it has multiple dimensions. It has what we might call the surface reality, or the bare facts of what happened. But it also has emotional dimensions, spiritual dimensions, meaning dimensions. The same event can be interpreted in many different ways, and the interpretation you choose will determine how the event affects you. For example, imagine a young woman who tries to start a business and it fails. The surface reality is that the business failed. But there are many ways to interpret this. She could interpret it as, I am a failure. I should not try to do big things. I am not meant to be an entrepreneur. This interpretation would crush her spirit and prevent her from trying again. Or she could interpret it as, I learned valuable lessons. I discovered what does not work. I am wiser now. I will try again with greater knowledge. This interpretation would strengthen her and prepare her for the next attempt. Or she could interpret it as, this business was not my true calling. I was supposed to fail at this, so I would be redirected toward my true passion. This interpretation would help her find her true path. All three interpretations are responses to the same event, but they create very different effects. The first interpretation creates a consciousness of failure. The second creates a consciousness of learning. The third creates a consciousness of being guided towards something better. Now, revision is the practice of deliberately choosing which interpretation you will focus on and make real in your consciousness. It is recognizing that you have the power to choose the meaning of your experience, and that chosen meaning will determine your future. A young man I knew had applied to graduate schools and been rejected by all of them. The surface reality was that he was rejected, but he had a choice about what that meant. He could have created the meaning, I am not smart enough for graduate school.
I should give up on my dream of becoming a scholar. And if he had created that meaning, he would have given up. Instead, he created a different meaning. He said to himself, the schools did not see my potential, but I see it, and I will prove them wrong. He revised the rejection. He reimagined it not as proof that he was not capable, but as proof that the schools had made a mistake. He made this revised meaning so real in his consciousness that the rejection no longer wounded him. It actually motivated him.
And then he did something unexpected. Instead of applying again the next year, he did something different. He got a job in his field of interest. He did independent research. He published a paper. And the next time he applied to graduate school, he was accepted to the top program in his field. Now, you might say the rejection did not matter. He was ultimately accepted. But I tell you, the revision mattered tremendously. Because if he had accepted the original meaning of the rejection, he would have been destroyed by it. He would not have had the motivation to do the independent work that ultimately made him a strong candidate. So the revision changed his consciousness, and his changed consciousness changed his choices and his actions, and his changed choices and actions changed his reality. This is the mechanism of revision. You are changing the meaning of your past. You are changing your consciousness about your past, and your changed consciousness is changing your future. Now let me speak about the practice of revision. How do you actually do it? What is the technique? First, you identify an event from your past that has troubled you, that has created a wound that has shaped your identity in a negative way. This might be a rejection, a failure, a loss, a trauma, a harsh word, a missed opportunity. You identify something that still carries an emotional charge when you think about it. Second, you take time to observe this memory without trying to change it. You notice what the memory contains. You notice what story you have been telling about it. You notice how it makes you feel. You do not judge yourself for having the memory or for the story you have been telling. You simply observe it. Third, you consciously decide what you would prefer the memory to contain. What would be a more nourishing interpretation? What would be a more empowering story? What would be a different outcome that would feel healing? Fourth, you close your eyes and you deliberately imagine the revised version. Not in a vague way, but in a vivid, sensory way. If it is a conversation, you imagine the words. You hear the tone of voice. If it is an event, you imagine the details. You see the colors, the light, the people involved. You feel the emotions that would accompany this revised version. Fifth, you repeat this practice. You return to the revised version again and again. You make it so real in your consciousness that it becomes more real than the original memory. And sixth, you allow the revised memory to become the foundation of your new consciousness. You allow your self-concept to shift based on the revised memory. You make decisions going forward based on this new understanding of your past. Let me give you a very specific example. A woman was told by a teacher when she was young that she was not a good writer. The teacher was harsh and critical of her writing, and the woman accepted this meaning. She told herself, I am not a good writer. I should not pursue writing. And for decades, she did not write. She accepted a life without expressing herself through writing. But at a certain point, she became aware of this wound. She realized that it was still affecting her. She realized that she was still carrying the teacher's harsh judgment. So she decided to revise the experience. She closed her eyes and she deliberately reimagined the moment where the teacher had criticized her writing. But this time, she imagined a different teacher. She imagined the teacher who saw her writing with fresh eyes. She imagined the teacher saying, you have real talent. Your voice is unique and powerful. You should nurture this gift. You should write. She made this imagined conversation so real that she could feel the teacher's words as if they were actually being spoken to her. She could feel the relief of being recognized and encouraged. And she repeated this practice. Every time she thought about writing, she would return to this revised memory. She would feel the encouraging teacher. She would feel the recognition of her talent. And as she did this practice, something shifted. She no longer carried the wound of being told she was not a good writer. She began to feel like someone who had been encouraged to write. And with this new self-concept, she began to write. She began to express herself. And she discovered that she did indeed have something to say. Her revised memory had freed her to become who she actually was. Now, I want to address something that people often ask when they learn about revision. They ask Neville, is this not just denial? Is this not just lying to ourselves? How can revising our memory change reality? I want to answer this very carefully, because the question touches on something fundamental about the nature of reality and the nature of time. You see, most people think of reality as fixed.
They think that what happened is locked in the past, unchangeable. They think that the past is a hard fact that determines their future. But I tell you, reality is not fixed in the way you think it is. Reality is fluid. Reality is created through consciousness. The past is not fixed in the way you think it is. The past is alive in your consciousness. And when you change your consciousness about your past, you change the reality of your past. This sounds impossible, I know. But let me explain. Think about memory. A memory is not a recording of the past. A memory is a construction. When you remember something, you are reconstructing it. You are selecting which details to focus on. You are interpreting what happened. You are attaching meaning to it. And this reconstruction happens in the present moment, not in the past. You are not accessing some file in your brain that contains a perfect recording of what happened. You are constructing a memory right now in this present moment. So when you revise your memory, when you deliberately reconstruct it differently, you are not changing something that happened in the past. You are changing how you are constructing it in the present. And that changed construction is real. It is happening in your consciousness right now. And because your consciousness is creating your reality, because your consciousness determines your decisions and your actions, changing how you construct your memory changes how you construct your present and future. Think of it this way. You are the author of your own story. The events of your life are the raw material. But you are the one who tells the story about those events. You are the one who chooses which detail to emphasize. You are the one who decides what the events mean. And you are free to rewrite your story at any time. Most people do not realize they have this freedom. They think they are stuck with the story that was handed to them. They think they have to accept the interpretation that their parents or teachers or society gave them. What revision is the practice of reclaiming your authorship. It is the practice of rewriting your story. And here is the remarkable thing. When you rewrite your story, when you change how you tell the story of your past, you are changing your consciousness. And your changed consciousness is creating a different present and a different future. A man I knew had experienced failure in his first marriage. The marriage had ended in divorce, and he had created a story about this failure. He told himself, I am not capable of maintaining a loving relationship. I am damaged. No one will want to be with me long term. Yet he carried this story with him. For years he did not pursue relationships. He told himself that it was not worth trying again. He had accepted the meaning that his failure meant he was incapable of love. But then he learned about revision, and he decided to revise not of the marriage itself, but the meaning of the marriage's ending. He began to tell himself a different story. He said, their marriage taught me invaluable lessons about myself and about what I need in a relationship. I learned how to communicate better. I learned what I value. I learned how to be more aware of my own needs and boundaries. The marriage did not fail. It succeeded in teaching me what I needed to learn, and then he took it further. He began to revise the ending of the marriage. He reimagined it with more compassion, more understanding, more recognition of what both he and his ex-wife had learned. He reimagined them ending the marriage as friends, with gratitude for what they had shared. He made this revised version so real in his consciousness that he began to carry a different story about his past. Nolan wrote a failure and damage, but a story of growth and learning. And with this new story, this new consciousness, he was able to pursue relationships again. He was able to show up differently in relationships. And he eventually found a partner and built a successful marriage. Did the revision change what actually happened in his first marriage? No. The marriage still ended. The events still occurred, but it changed what those events meant. It changed the story he was telling about them. And that changed story became the foundation of a new consciousness. And that new consciousness created a different future.
This is the power of revision. It is not about denying the past. It is about reclaiming the right to tell your own story about the past. It is about recognizing that meaning is not fixed in the past. Meaning is created in the present, and you are the creator of the meaning. Now let me speak about some specific areas where revision can be powerfully applied. First, there is revision of failures and disappointments. Most people carry wounds from failures. They applied for a job and did not get it. They started a business and it failed. They took a risk and it did not work out. And they have created stories about these failures, stories that say something is wrong with them, that they are not good enough, that they should not try again. Revision allows you to change these stories. Instead of seeing the failure as proof that you are inadequate, you can revise it to see it as a valuable learning experience. You can revise it to see it as a redirection towards something better. You can revise it to see it as temporary, not permanent. You can revise it to see it as something that happened, not something that defines you. Second, there is revision of rejections and abandonments. People carry deep wounds from rejection. A lover left them. A parent did not show up for them. A friend betrayed them, and he has created stories about what this rejection means. Stories that say they are not lovable, not valuable, not worth being present for. Revision allows you to change these stories. You can revise the rejection to understand it through a different lens. You can revise it to see that the person who rejected you was acting from their own limitations, not from your inadequacy. You can revise it to see that the rejection opened a door to something better. You can revise it to see that you are worthy of love, even if this particular person could not give it to you. Third, there is revision of trauma and abuse. People who have experienced trauma carry wounds that seem permanent, but revision can be a powerful tool for healing. Not by denying that the trauma happened, but by changing the meaning of it in consciousness. A person who was abused can revise the abuse to see themselves as strong, as having survived, as being defined not by what was done to them, but by how they have grown and healed. They can revise the abuser to understand them as wounded, as acting from their own damaged consciousness. They can revise the trauma to see it as something they have overcome, not something that defines them. I want to be very careful here because I know trauma is real and serious. I am not saying that revision erases trauma. I am saying that revision can help you change your relationship to the trauma. It can help you reclaim your power. It can help you heal the wound. Fourth, there is revision of childhood wounds and parental relationships. Most people carry wounds from their childhood. A parent was distant, critical, harsh, absent. And they have created stories about what this means. Stories that have shaped their identity, their relationships, their sense of worthiness. Revision allows you to go back into these childhood experiences and revise them. You can revise your parents' words with compassion, understanding their own wounds. You can revise the experiences to see them differently, to extract the learning, to let go of the sting. A man I knew had a father who was never satisfied. No matter what the man accomplished, the father was critical. He always said, "You could have done better." And the man carried this throughout his life. He was never satisfied with his own accomplishments. He was always driven by a sense of inadequacy. But then he learned about revision. And he decided to go back to these moments with his father, and he revised them. He imagined his father saying, "I am proud of you. I see your effort. I recognize your growth. I believe in you." And he made this revised version so real that it began to replace the original memory. But then he did something even more powerful. He revised his understanding of his father. He recognized that his father's criticism had nothing to do with him. It was his father's own wound. His father had been criticized as a child. His father was driven by his own sense of inadequacy. His father's words were an expression of his own pain, not a truth about his son. And when the man revised his understanding of his father, when he saw his father with compassion instead of with resentment, something shifted. The wound began to heal, and he began to feel differently about his own accomplishments. He began to feel satisfaction. He began to feel pride. Fifth, there's revision of our own past actions and decisions. Most people carry regret about things they have done, ways they have behaved, choices they have made. They replay these moments and think, I should have done it differently. I was wrong. I was foolish. Revision allows you to change your relationship to these past actions. You can revise your judgment of yourself. You can understand your past self with compassion, recognizing the consciousness you had at the time, the limitations you had, the information you had. A woman I knew had made a decision in her 30s that she deeply regretted. She had chosen a safe career over her true passion. She had chosen financial security over fulfillment. And for years, she had carried regret. She would replay the decision and think, I was so foolish. I gave up my dreams. I settled for less. But then she learned about revision, and she revised her judgment of a past decision. She recognized that the decision had made sense at the time. She had legitimate fears about financial instability. She had responsibilities. She had made the best decision she could with the consciousness she had at that time. And then she did something that proved the power of revision. She revised her belief that it was too late. She revised the story, that she had forever missed her chance. She revised it to see that it was not too late, that she could still pursue her passion, that the decision she made 30 years ago did not determine her future. And you know what happened? She began to pursue her passion. She found ways to incorporate it into her life. She found that the timing was actually perfect because the wisdom and experience she had gained made her better at her passion than she would have been 30 years earlier. This is the power of revision applied to regret. It frees you from the past. It allows you to reclaim your power. It shows you that the past does not determine your future. Now, as we move toward the end of the first half of this exploration, I want to give you some foundational practices for revision. These are techniques you can begin using immediately to revise your past and begin healing your wounds. The first practice is what I call the memory observation. Before you revise a memory, you must first really observe it. You must see it clearly without trying to change it. To do this practice, think of a memory that carries some emotional charge. It does not have to be a major trauma. It can be a small disappointment, a mildly rejecting comment, a moment of embarrassment or failure. Choose a memory that still affects you when you think about it. Close your eyes and revisit this memory. See the scene, who was there, what was the setting, what happened, what was said, how did you feel. Do not try to change anything yet, just observe. Notice the emotions that come up. Notice the story you've been telling about this memory. Notice what conclusion you have drawn about yourself, about others, or about the world based on this memory. Write this down if you want. Capture the memory of the story as clearly as possible. This observation is important because you cannot revise something you have not fully seen. You must understand the original memory clearly before you can revise it effectively. The second practice is what I call the meaning shift. Once you will observe the memory, you consciously choose a different meaning for it. Ask yourself, what else could this memory mean? How could I interpret this differently? What would be a more empowering interpretation? What would be a more compassionate interpretation? For example, if the memory is of being told you were not smart, you could shift the meaning from I am not smart to that person's assessment of me was limited, or I was in a different learning environment than I thrive in, or I have discovered that I am intelligent in ways that were not recognized at that time. Notice that you are not denying the memory. You are not saying the person did not say what they said. You are simply choosing a different meaning for what was said. Write down the new meaning. Get clear on it. The third practice is what I call the memory reconstruction. Once you have chosen a new meaning, you deliberately reconstruct the memory with a different content. Close your eyes, return to the scene of the memory. But this time imagine it differently. If the original memory involved criticism, imagine it involving encouragement. If it involved rejection, imagine it involving acceptance. If it involved failure, imagine it involving success. Make the reconstruction as vivid and detailed as possible. If it is a conversation, hear the words, hear the tone of voice. If it is an event, see the details. The colors, the light, the expressions on people's faces. Feel the emotions, the relief, the joy, the pride of the revised version. Spend several minutes in this revised memory. Let it become real in your consciousness. The fourth practice is what I call the memory return. Do not revise once and forget about it. Return to the revised memory repeatedly. Make it familiar, make it more real than the original memory. Every time the original memory surfaces in your mind, when you find yourself thinking about it, when it is triggered by something you see or hear, deliberately return to the revised version. Replace the original with the revised. Do this again and again. Over time, through repetition, the revised memory will become more real in your consciousness than the original. It will become your actual memory, not in the sense that you forget what originally happened, but in the sense that the revised meaning becomes your primary consciousness about the event. The fifth practice is what I call the consciousness integration. As you revise your memory, allow your consciousness to shift based on the revised memory, allow your self-concept to change, allow your beliefs about yourself to evolve. If you have revived a memory of being inadequate to a memory of being capable, begin to see yourself as capable. Make decisions as a capable person would make them. Speak about yourself as capable. Gradually, the revised memory will become integrated into your overall sense of self. This is where the real transformation occurs. Not in the revision of the memory itself, but in the change of consciousness that results from the revision, and the change in your life that results from the changed consciousness. These five practices form the foundation of the law of revision. They are not complicated. They are not difficult, but they are powerful, and they are available to you right now. Here, at the halfway point of this first part of our exploration, I want to pause and give you a few minutes to consider what you have learned. Think about your own past. Think about memories that have troubled you. Think about stories you have been telling about yourself based on these memories. And then think about what might be possible if you revise these memories. What if the wound could be healed? What if the story could be rewritten? What if the past no longer defines your future? In the second half of this exploration, we will go much deeper. We will explore how revision can be used to reshape your entire life. We will explore the relationship between revision and manifestation. We will explore how to revise not just individual memories, but entire chapters of your life. And we will explore the ultimate power of revision, the ability to step into a completely different version of your life by revising your past. But for now, I want you to understand this fundamental truth. You are not imprisoned by your past. Your past is alive in your consciousness right now, and you have the power to revise it. You have the power to change what it means. You have the power to change the story you tell about it. And in doing so, you have the power to transform your present and your future. This is the beginning of true freedom. This is the beginning of reclaiming your power as the creator of your own life. Now, I want to take you much deeper into the power of revision. We have established the foundational principles. We have explored the 5 major life domains where revision can be applied. We have learned the 5 foundational practices, but there is so much more to understand about how revision can be used to completely transform your life. In this second half, I want to explore what I call the advanced applications of revision. These are more sophisticated uses of the revision principle that can transform not just individual memories, but entire chapters of your life, entire timelines, entire versions of yourself. Let me begin by speaking about what I call the revision of life chapters. Most people think of revision as something you apply to individual memory. You remember a rejection, you revise it. You remember a failure, you revise it. But you can go much deeper. You can revise entire chapters of your life. Think of your life as a book. It is divided into chapters. Childhood is one chapter, adolescence is another. Young adulthood is another, your career is a chapter, your relationships are chapters. Each chapter has events, experiences, patterns, themes that characterize it. Now, most people are imprisoned by an entire chapter, not just by individual events. They say things like, my 20s were a failure, I wasted that decade. Or my childhood was traumatic, my entire personality was shaped by that. Or my marriage was a disaster, the entire period of my life was lost. And they carry the entire chapter as if it is a fixed, unchangeable reality. But you can revise an entire chapter. You can go back and reimagine the entire period with a different meaning, a different understanding, a different focus. The woman I knew had spent her 30s in a marriage that ultimately ended in divorce. For several years after the divorce, she carried regret about the entire decade. She said, my 30s were wasted. I gave those years to a man who did not appreciate me. I lost 10 years of my life. The entire chapter was characterized by regret and loss. And this regret was affecting her present. It was affecting how she showed up in new relationships. It was affecting her confidence. But then she learned about the revision of life chapters. And she decided to go back and revise her entire 30s. She did not revise the divorce itself. The divorce happened. But she revised the meaning of the entire chapter. She began to ask herself, what did I learn in my 30s? She learned about commitment. She learned about vulnerability. She learned about what she needed in a partner. She learned what she valued. She learned how to communicate. She learned how to support another person. She learned resilience through heartbreak. She began to see the entire chapter not as 10 years lost, but as 10 years of intensive learning and growth. She began to see the marriage not as a failure, but as a profound teacher. She began to revise the entire chapter. From I wasted my 30s to my 30s were a period of deep learning and growth that prepared me for my future. And as she revised the entire chapter, something shifted. The regret lifted. The sense of loss diminished. And she found herself showing up in her new relationships with confidence instead of fear. Because she was no longer coming from a consciousness of having wasted years. She was coming from a consciousness of having been deeply prepared. This is the power of revising life chapters. It is not denying that things happen. It is changing how you understand the period as a whole. Now let me speak about what I call timeline revision. This is a more advanced application and it is very powerful. You see, most people believe there is only one timeline. There is what actually happened. But I tell you there are multiple timelines. There are multiple possible interpretations of the sequence of events that led you to where you are now. Think about your life. Think about the series of events that led you to your present circumstances. At each decision point, there were choices. At each moment, there were possibilities. The path you took led you here. But there were other paths you could have taken. There were other possible timelines. Now, most people focus on the path they actually took. They tell the story of their life as a sequence of events that led to where they are. And if they are unhappy with where they are, they focus on the mistakes on the path. They say, if only I had made a different choice here. If only I had not done that. My life would be different. But revision allows you to do something more powerful. It allows you to revise your understanding of which timeline you are actually on. Let me explain. Imagine a man who is 40 years old. He made certain choices in his 20s and 30s that he now regrets. He is unhappy with his life. He has a job he does not like. A relationship is unfulfilling. A sense of being stuck. He could focus on the path he took. He could say, I made bad choices. If only I had done things differently, I would be happy now. And this would keep him feeling like a victim of his past. Or he could revise his timeline. He could ask himself, given all the choices I actually made, all the paths I actually took, what is the most empowering story about why I ended up here? And he might revise his understanding to something like, every choice I made, even the ones that seemed wrong at the time, was exactly what I needed to experience in order to be ready for the next phase of my life. I'm 40 years old now, and I finally understand what I want. The previous years were not wasted. They were preparation. They were the exact path I needed to take to become who I am now, to be ready for what is coming. This is a revision of the timeline, not the events, but the meaning of the sequence of events. Not the path, but the story about the path. A woman I knew had been told repeatedly that she would never be a mother. She had fertility issues. She had tried treatments that did not work. For years she grieved the timeline in which she had children. She saw other women having babies, and she felt the loss of the timeline she wanted but could not have. But then she learned about timeline revision, and she asked herself, given the actual path I took, given that I do not have biological children, what is another way to understand this timeline? And she began to revise her timeline. She realized that the path that seemed like deprivation had actually led her to become a mentor to young people. It had led her to invest in her marriage in a way that had deepened it. It had led her to pursue work that was deeply meaningful. It had led her to develop resilience and compassion that she would not have developed otherwise. She revised the timeline from I am on the timeline where I do not get to be a mother to I am on the timeline where I become a different kind of nurturer, where I develop different capacities, where I create a different kind of legacy. And as she revised the timeline, the grief began to lift. And she found herself appreciating the actual path she was on. And she found that the actual path, though different from the one she had imagined, was beautiful in its own way. This is the power of timeline revision. It is recognizing that the timeline you are on is not necessarily the wrong one. It is learning to appreciate the timeline you are actually on, and in doing so, stepping into it more fully. Now let me speak about what I call identity revision. This is perhaps the most powerful form of revision because it operates at the deepest level, the level of who you believe you are. You see, your identity is not fixed. Your identity is not determined by your past. Your identity is something you are constructing and reconstructing in each moment through the stories you tell about yourself. Most people construct their identity based on their past. They say, I am someone who has failed. I am someone who has been rejected. I am someone who has been hurt. I am someone who is not good enough. And these identities are constructed from memories and stories about past events. But identity revision is the practice of going back and revising your understanding of who you are based on revised interpretation of your past. A man I knew had constructed his identity around being a person who made bad decisions. He had made several significant choices that he regretted, and he had built an entire identity on being bad at decisions. He saw himself as someone who could not be trusted to make good choices. And because he saw himself this way, he made decisions from a place of doubt and hesitation. And the decisions he made reflected his doubt. And his doubting decisions created outcomes that confirmed his identity. But then he learned about identity revision, and he decided to revise his identity. He went back to the decisions he had regretted, and instead of seeing them as proof that he was bad at decisions, he revised them. He saw them as decisions made by a younger version of himself who was doing his best with the information and consciousness he had at the time. And then he revised his identity. Instead of I am someone who makes bad decisions, he revised it to I am someone who has learned from my experiences and now makes better decisions. Or even deeper, I am someone who trusts my own wisdom. And he made this revised identity so real in his consciousness that it became his actual identity. And from this new identity, he made different decisions. And the different decisions created different outcomes. And he became the person he was identifying as a Euros, someone whose decisions led to positive results. This is identity revision. It is the deepest form of revision because it changes not just what you remember, but who you believe you are. And when you revise who you are, your entire reality shifts. Now, I want to speak about the relationship between revision and manifestation, because this is a critical connection that many people do not understand. You see, many people learn about manifestation separately from revision. They learn the law of assumption. They learn about feeling the wish fulfilled. They learn about assuming the state of already having what they desire. And they practice these things, and often they experience success. But then they encounter something that blocks their manifestation, and that something is their past. Let me give you an example. A woman wants to manifest a loving relationship. She practices the law of assumption. She feels herself as being in a beautiful, fulfilling relationship. She imagines conversations with her beloved partner. She assumes the state of being loved and cherished. And for a while, things seem to be working. But then she does not manifest the relationship. Or she manifests a relationship, but it does not feel the way she assumed it would. Or the relationship manifests and then dissolves. And she is confused. She says, I assumed the wish fulfilled. Why did it not work? The answer is often this: her past was interfering with her manifestation. She had deep wounds from past rejections. She had memories of heartbreak. She had beliefs about herself that contradicted her assumption. And these past wounds and beliefs were blocking the manifestation. This is where revision becomes essential in the manifestation process. Because you cannot manifest a future that contradicts your past consciousness. Your past consciousness is like an anchor. It is holding you in place. And if you try to manifest a future that contradicts this anchor, there will be tension. There will be resistance. And the manifestation will be blocked. So the practice becomes this. First, revise your past. Heal the wounds, change the beliefs, revise the memories so that they support your desired future rather than contradicting it. And only then, when your past consciousness has been revised and healed, can you fully manifest your desired future. A man I knew wanted to manifest financial abundance. He practiced the law of assumption. He felt himself as prosperous. He imagined abundance. He lived from the consciousness of having plenty. And for a while, things improved. His income increased slightly. He felt more confident with money, but he could not manifest true financial abundance. He remained in a place of moderate comfort, but not the abundance he desired. Then he realized that his past was anchoring him. He had grown up in poverty. His parents had struggled with money. They had instilled in him a deep fear of scarcity. They had told him that he would never have enough. And this fear was so deep that even though he was consciously assuming abundance, unconsciously, his past consciousness was creating a ceiling on what he could manifest. So he began to revise his past. He went back to memories of his parents struggling with money. And instead of seeing those memories as evidence that he was doomed to poverty, he revised them. He revised his understanding of his parents. He recognized that they had done their best with the resources and consciousness they had. He recognized that their struggle was not his destiny. He revised his understanding of poverty from this is my heritage to this is what my parents experienced, but it is not necessarily my future. And he revised memories of himself. He revised memories where he had been afraid of money, and he reimagined them with confidence instead of fear. He revised his identity from I am someone from a poor family who will always struggle to I am someone who is breaking the pattern of poverty and creating wealth. As he did this revision work, something shifted, and then the manifestation began to work more powerfully. His income increased significantly. Opportunities came. The business he started became profitable. He began to genuinely manifest the abundance he had been trying to manifest. The revision cleared the blockage. It aligned his past consciousness with his desired future. And once the alignment was complete, manifestation became natural. This is the relation between revision and manifestation. Revision clears the past blockages so that manifestation can flow freely. Now let me speak about what I call future revision. This is a concept that takes some people a while to understand. but it is very powerful. Most people think of revision as something that applies only to the past. You revise a memory. You revise an experience that happened. But I tell you, you can also revise your future. See, your future is not fixed. Your future exists in consciousness, the same way your past does. Your future is a collection of beliefs, expectations, assumptions, and stories about what is going to happen. And just as you can revise your past, you can revise your future. In fact, what we call manifestation is, in a sense, a form of future revision. When you assume the wish fulfilled, when you feel yourself as already having what you desire, you are revising your future. You are changing what you expect to happen. You are changing your assumption about what is coming. But there is a deeper form of future revision that goes beyond just manifesting what you want. It is revising your assumptions about what is possible for you. Most people have very limited assumptions about their future. They say, given my age, my background, my education, my current circumstances, here are the kinds of things that are possible for me, and here are the things that are not possible. And they lock themselves into a limited future based on these assumptions. But future revision is the practice of expanding these assumptions. It is revising your belief about what is possible. A woman I knew was 45 years old. She had been a stay-at-home mother for 20 years. Her children were outgrown, and she was wondering what her future held. And she had a very limited assumption about her future. She had a finely limited assumption about her future. She assumed that because she had been out of the workforce for 20 years, that because she was 45, that because the economy was competitive, that she could only get a low-level job. She could only earn a modest income. She could only have a modest life. But then she learned about future revision, and she decided to revise her assumptions about her future. She asked herself, what if my 20 years as a mother were not lost time, but were preparation? What if the skills I developed as a mother, a youth organization, patience, teaching, managing complexity, youth, what if these are valuable in the marketplace? What if my age is not a liability, but an asset? What if there are people who want to hire someone mature, experienced, wise? What if there is an ideal job for me that I have not even imagined yet? What if there are opportunities that are beyond what I am currently imagining? She revised her future assumptions from I can only get a modest job and modest life to the right opportunities waiting for me. The universe has something perfect for me. I am ready for abundance. And she made these revised future assumptions so real in her consciousness that she began to expect them. She began to assume that something wonderful was coming. And then an opportunity appeared that was far better than she had imagined. A company was looking for someone to start a program for them. The role required someone with the exact combination of skills she had. The salary was far more than she had expected she could earn, and she was offered the position. The opportunity had always existed, but her limited assumptions about the future had prevented her from seeing it. Once she revised her assumptions, once she expanded her belief about what was possible for her, the opportunity became visible and available. This is future revision. It is expanding your assumption about what is possible, and in doing so, making new possibilities real in your life. Now, let me speak about what I call victim revision. This is the practice of revising your understanding of the relationship between yourself and what has happened to you. Most people who have experienced hurt, loss, or trauma have unconsciously taken on a victim identity. They say, this happened to me, I did not choose it, I am a victim of circumstance, I am a victim of other people's actions. And while it is true that things happen that we do not choose, it is not true that we have to remain victims. Victim revision is the practice of revising your relationship to what has happened so that you move from victim consciousness to survivor consciousness to creator consciousness. Let me explain the difference. Victim consciousness says, this happened to me, and I am destroyed by it. I am ruined. My life is over. Survivor consciousness says, this happened to me, And it was difficult, but I survived. I'm stronger for having survived it. Creator consciousness says, this happened to me. It was difficult, but I choose how I relate to it. I choose what it means. I choose what I will do with it. I am creating my future based on how I interpret this experience. A man I knew had been betrayed by a business partner. The betrayal resulted in significant financial loss. And the man had taken on a victim identity. He said, I was betrayed. I am a fool for trusting. I will never trust again. I am ruined. But then he learned about victim revision. And he consciously chose to revise his relationship to the betrayal. He acknowledged that he had been betrayed. The betrayal was real. But if he revised his understanding of what the betrayal meant about him, he recognized that being betrayed did not mean he was a fool. It meant that someone else made a choice to betray him. It was about their character, not about his judgment. He revised his understanding of the financial loss. Yes, he had lost money, but he recognized that he'd also learned a valuable lesson about the importance of oversight, about the risk of business, about how to structure partnerships differently. And most importantly, he revised his identity. Instead of I am a fool who was betrayed, he revised it to I am a person who trusted and I was betrayed. And I survived and I learned and I am wiser now. And he revised his future expectations. Instead of I will never trust again, he revised it to I will trust more carefully. I will build better structures. I will move forward with wisdom. As he made these revisions, his victim consciousness dissolved. He moved into survivor consciousness and then into creator consciousness. And from that place, he was able to move forward with his life. This is victim revision. It is the practice of moving from victim consciousness to creator consciousness by revising how you relate to what has happened to you. Now, let me speak about the ultimate form of revision, which is what I call total life revision. This is the most comprehensive form of revision, and it can be transformative in the deepest way. Total life revision is the practice of going back over your entire life, looking at all the major chapters, all the major events, all the major relationships, all the major decisions, and revising your understanding of all of them. It is not a quick practice. It is a deep, comprehensive practice. It might take weeks or months, but the result is that you transform your fundamental consciousness about your entire life. Let me give you an example. A woman decided to do a total life revision. She looked at her childhood. She looked at her adolescence. She looked at her young adulthood. She looked at her career. She looked at her relationships. She looked at her accomplishments and her failures. And as she looked at her entire life, she began to ask a fundamental question. Given everything that has happened, given every choice I have made, given every experience I have had, what is the most empowering story I can tell about my life? And she began to revise. She revised her understanding of her childhood from I was deprived to I was taught resilience. She revised her understanding of her failures from I am a failure to I have learned how to try again. She revised her understanding of her relationships from I have been hurt to I have loved deeply and learned about myself through love. And as she revised each chapter, she began to see her entire life in a new light. She saw a coherent narrative. She saw that everything had led her to who she was now. She saw that her struggles had developed her strength. She saw that her failures had taught her wisdom. She saw that her pain had developed her compassion. She revised her identity from I am someone to whom bad things have happened to I am someone who has been shaped by experience and has become strong, wise, and compassionate. And as she completed this total life revision, something profound happened. She felt a peace she had never felt before. She felt acceptance of her life. She felt gratitude for her past. She felt powerful in her present because she had transformed her understanding of her past. I mean, it's a total life revision. And it's one of the most transformative practices you can do. Now, I want to speak about the practice of revision in relationship. Because revision is not just for your personal past. It can be profoundly used in your relationships. Think about your relationships that yours with your partner, your parents, your children, your friends. These relationships have histories. There are events that have hurt. There are patterns that have developed. There are understandings that have formed. And most people are trapped in these patterns and understandings. They relate to each other based on the history. They repeat the same dynamics. They have the same conversation. But revision can free you from these patterns. You can revise how you understand the relationship. You can revise how you understand the other person. You can revise how you understand yourself in the relationship. A couple I knew had a marriage that was characterized by a pattern. The husband would withdraw initially, and the wife would pursue. The husband would feel suffocated and pull away more. The wife would feel rejected and pursue more desperately. And this pattern repeated again and again. They were both trapped in this pattern. Both of them felt misunderstood. Both of them felt like victims of the other's behavior. But then they learned about relationship revision, and they each decided to revise their understanding of the pattern. The husband revised his understanding of his wife's pursuit. Instead of seeing it as suffocation, he revised it to see it as an expression of her need to feel connected. He recognized that her pursuit was not about controlling him, but about her desire to be close. And as he revised his understanding, he stopped experiencing her pursuit as an attack. The wife revised her understanding of the husband's withdrawal. Instead of seeing it as rejection, she revised it to see it as his way of managing his own overwhelm. She recognized that his withdrawal was not about her worthiness, but about his own needs. And as she revised her understanding, she stopped experiencing his withdrawal as a statement about her value. And as they each revised their understanding of the other's behavior, the pattern began to dissolve, because they were no longer reacting to what they thought the other person was doing. They were responding to their revised understanding of what was actually happening here as a couple who both needed connection but had different styles. This is relationship revision, and it can transform relationships from patterns of misunderstanding and hurt to patterns of understanding and connection. Now I want to give you some advanced practices for revision. These are techniques you can use for the more sophisticated applications we have discussed. The first practice is what I call the chapter revision. This is used for revising entire chapters of your life rather than individual events. To do this practice, identify a chapter of your life that feels regretful or limiting. It might be a decade. It might be a period characterized by a particular relationship or job or circumstance. Then set aside time, perhaps an hour or more, to revisit the entire chapter. Close your eyes and walk through the chapter. Visit the major events. Feel the emotions you felt during that period. Let yourself fully experience what it was like. Then ask yourself, what is the most positive way I can understand this chapter? What did this chapter teach me? What did I develop during this chapter? How did this chapter prepare me for what came after? Allow your consciousness to find the wisdom in the chapter. Allow yourself to see that even the difficult parts served a purpose. Even the painful parts contributed to your growth. Then revise your story about the chapter. Create a new narrative that acknowledges what happened but emphasizes the learning, the growth, the purpose. Make this new narrative so real that it becomes your actual memory of the chapter. The second practice is what I call the timeline reconciliation. This is used for making peace with the timeline you are actually on. To do this practice, look at your current life. Look at where you are now, a year or your age, your circumstances, your relationships, your situation. Ask yourself, is this the timeline I imagined I would be on? The answer is often no. Most people imagined a different path. Most people have things they regret about the path they took. But then do this. Ask yourself, given that I'm actually on this timeline, given that These are my actual circumstances. What is beautiful about this timeline? What are the gifts of being on this particular path? Allow your consciousness to find the gifts. The person who is on the timeline of being a single parent might recognize the depth of their relationship with their child. The person on the timeline of a different career than they imagined might recognize that they have developed skills they would not have developed otherwise. And as you find the gifts of your timeline, revise your relationship to it. Move from resentment to appreciation. Move from I am on the wrong timeline to I am on my timeline, and it has unexpected gifts. The third practice is what I call the identity reconstruction. This is used for revising who you believe you are at the deepest level. To do this practice, identify the identity you have been living with, the belief about who you are. It might be, I am a failure. It might be, I am not good enough. It might be, I am unlovable. It might be, I am not intelligent. Then ask yourself, is this identity based on absolute truth, or is it based on an interpretation of past experiences? The answer is always the latter. Your identity is based on how you've interpreted past experiences. And because interpretation can be revised, so can identity. Then, revise the identity. Go back through your life and find evidence for a different identity. Find times when you succeeded. Find times when you were loved. Find times when you were intelligent. Build a case for a different identity, and then inhabit this new identity. Make decisions as this new identity. Speak about yourself as this new identity until the new identity becomes as real as the old one, and then more real. The fourth practice is what I call the victim to creator transformation. This is used for moving from victim consciousness to creator consciousness. To do this practice, identify an area of your life where you feel like a victim. An area where you feel like something happened to you and you are suffering the consequences. Then do this. Stop and acknowledge the reality. Yes, something happened. It was not your choice. You did not deserve it. This is not denying the reality. But then ask yourself, now that it has happened, what will I do with it? Now that this is my reality, how will I respond? Now that this is my past, how will I use it? And begin to shift from this happened to me to this happened, and now I'm creating my response. Begin to shift from victim to creator. This is not quick. It takes time. But gradually you move from powerlessness to power. From seeing yourself as destroyed by what happened to seeing yourself as shaped by what happened, but choosing your future response. Now, as we move toward the conclusion of this exploration, I want to speak about something that many people want to know. They ask, Neville, if I revise my past, will other people's memories change? If I revise an event that involved another person, will they also revise it? And the answer is no. Other people's memories will not change. They will continue to hold their own versions of events. This is the nature of consciousness. Each person is operating from their own consciousness. But here is what is important. You do not need their memories to change. You only need your memory to change, because your memory is what is creating your consciousness, and your consciousness is what is creating your reality. And your reality is the only one you are actually experiencing. So if you revise your memory of an event, your consciousness about that event will change, and your future will be different, even if the other person continues to hold their original memory. I knew a woman who had a difficult relationship with her mother. For years, the woman held resentment about her mother's harshness, and the resentment was affecting her present and her relationships. But then she revised her memory and her understanding of her mother. She revised it with compassion. She revised it to see that her mother had done her best with her own wounds. And as she revised, the woman's consciousness changed. The resentment lifted. She felt peace. And the remarkable thing was that she did not need her mother to change. She did not need her mother to acknowledge that she had been harsh or apologize. She did not need her mother to revise her own understanding. All she needed was her own understanding to be revised. And that was enough to transform the relationship and their experience of it. This is a crucial understanding. You do not have to wait for others to revise their consciousness. You only have to revise your own. And that is enough. Now, I want to speak about the ultimate promise of revision. Because revision is not just about healing your past. It is about something much deeper. Revision is about waking up to the truth that you are not a victim of time. You are not imprisoned by the past. You are not determined by what has already happened. You are the consciousness that gives meaning to what has happened. And you are free to choose that meaning. This is liberation. This is freedom. This is the awakening that comes from truly understanding the power of revision. When you revise your past, you're not just changing memories. You're changing your fundamental relationship to reality. You are recognizing that reality is not fixed. Meaning is not fixed. Your future is not determined. Everything is open to your creative consciousness. And this recognition is profoundly liberating. Because if your future is not determined by your past, then you are free. You are free to create a different future. You are free to become a different person. You are free to revise not just your memory of the past, but your expectation for the future. A man I knew spent years trying to overcome his past. He went to therapy. He did every healing modality he could find. He tried to process his past, to understand his past, to make peace with his past. And while all of this was helpful, something fundamental was still missing. But then he learned about revision, and he realized that he did not have to overcome his past. He did not have to process it endlessly. He could simply revise it. And in revising it, he could transform his relationship to it. And in transforming his relationship to it, he could be free of it. And he did. He revised his past comprehensively. And the freedom he experienced was unlike anything he had felt before, because he was not free in spite of his past. He was free through his revised understanding of his past. This is the ultimate promise of revision. Freedom, not in the future, not once you have fully healed, but now, through the revision of your past in this very moment. So here, at the conclusion of this exploration, I want to leave you with this understanding. Your past is not your destiny. The meaning you have given to your past is a choice, not a fact. And you can change that choice. You can revise your past. You can heal your wounds. You can transform your consciousness. And in doing so, you transform your present and your future. This is the power of revision. This is your power. This is available to you right now. I want to encourage you to begin. Choose one chapter, one memory, one identity, one relationship that you want to revise. And begin the practice, observe it clearly, shift the meaning, reconstruct the memory, return to the revised version, integrate it into your consciousness, and then watch as your life transforms. Watch as the past releases its hold on you. Watch as the future opens up. Watch as you become free. The power of revision is within you. It is your birthright. It is your freedom. Use it, claim it, transform your life. Good night.